Okay, I'm sure she'll be here eventually.
I'm waiting for the TV. Welcome, everyone, to the regularly scheduled Wenham Board of Selectmen meeting. Today is February 20th, 2000, and that we're here to have our regularly scheduled, posted Board of Selectmen meeting. So we begin every meeting with an invitation to those in the audience who might like to come to the microphone and talk about something that's not already on the agenda. If it's already on the agenda, you have to wait until we get to that agenda item. So is there anybody who wants to say something that is not on the agenda? As usual, we have a crowd back there. No,
actually, we do. This is great.
But we don't have a crowd coming to the microphone.
No, not to the microphone, no. It's a quiet crowd.
All right. So we're into announcements now.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. We have the annual town election, and that where
I think
the usual recitation, Peter, of the.
It's in number 1.
Under 1, tab
right,
1.
The very first tab.
Oh, missed
I
it.
have trouble with my book. It's
Here
too
we go.
skinny.
Just kidding.
So here are the open positions. Any of you who have nothing else to do, would like to run and help us serve the town, please pay attention. 3-year term on the Board of Assessors, 3-year term on the Board of Health. These are interesting positions. 1 3-year term on the Board of Selectmen, a very interesting position. 1 3-year term on the Hamilton Wenham Library Board of Trustees at large. 1 3-year term on the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee. 1 term as a one year term of a moderator. 1 5-year term on the Planning Board. 1 3-year term on the Planning Board. 1 3-year term on the Water Commission. Is anybody taking out papers who are? I see the Water Commission is here tonight.
Okay.
No. All right. 1 5-year term on the Housing Authority. Last day to submit papers back to the clerk is Thursday, February 22nd. You got 2 days.
It's Thursday, right? Yeah.
You got a day and a half, actually, because it's after hours right now. The nomination papers for the following regional school committee seats are available from the school district office as of Friday, January 12th, and requires 40 signatures. By the way, the other only required 20 signatures. 40 for the regional school district from registered voters of either Hamilton or Wenham or both. We have 2 3-year terms on the regional school committee. The last day to submit papers back to the school administration is Monday, February 26th. The clerk will complete the certification of all nominees on Thursday, March 8th, 2018. The last day to withdraw, if you get cold feet, one's name is Monday, March 12th. So you can take out papers, put them in, and think better of it and take them out. If you do that. The annual town luncheon is Saturday, April 7th at noontime at the Buca School, as always. Good lunch. Annual town meeting is Saturday, April 7th at 1 p.m., right after the luncheon. And the elections are April 12th, all day long, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Town Hall. Okay, I got to do that probably one more time, right? Okay.
So cutest dog is John's.
Pardon me?
The next agenda item is John's.
Yes. Winner of the Wenham Cutest Dog Contest is announced. Diane, would you like to come up here and announce?
I can't wait to hear. Yay!
Is the dog here?
I know, the dog.
The dog is not here. My
dog is not here?
The winning dog?
I didn't think that it would be a good idea to invite 12 dogs.
I think
just
it
the
would be a
winning
great
dog,
idea.
Winning dog, well, then they would know before they got here.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Oh, so they don't know. The winners
The winners do not know.
winner
These are the
doesn't
top
know.
12.
Oh, the suspense is killing me now.
Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to take some time out of everyone's day to bring you the Cutest Dogs in Wenham 2018. Before I go there, I'd like to just mention that registering your dogs is a Mass General law, and it's a law that exists for the safety of the dogs as well as for the residents and the communities that they live. In connection with the Mass General law, there are town bylaws. And in Wenham, our town bylaw says that our dog year goes from January to December, and any dog not new to Wenham and not registered by February 1st will be assessed a $25 late fee per dog on top of the fee. So to avoid that late fee, I brought up the idea of the contest. The contest was open to any dogs who were registered before January 31st and wanted to bring in a picture to be posted. So we had 111 dogs.
Oh, my goodness
Is
gracious.
Did we do well because of the contest? Did that improve our
We
registration?
did, thank you very much. We got 10% more dogs registered in the month of January than we did last year.
Cool.
So I'm very happy with that, I'm pleased with that, I'm looking forward to increasing that going forward.
Wow, 111 dogs.
There were a lot of
A
pictures.
little more than Diana originally.
Yeah.
I
I didn't
think
really
it's fair
expect
to say.
111
Didn't
dogs. As you
expect
can
to
see, the posters out there got a little bit crazy. So I wanted to thank all 465 dog owners who registered their dogs during the month and avoided the late fee. The 111 dog owners who submitted pictures very nicely. And I wanted to thank somebody else. I can't remember, but I'll remember it soon. But so what I did, before we decide who the big winner is, I wanted to let you know the top 12 dogs.
Also, we're
So
gonna
the
get to
top
see
12
pictures.
dogs are right here on the screen.
All right. Love dog pictures.
We have Fritz Minnick and George Kilpatrick. We have Gizmo Clem and Jimmy Petro.
Oh, that's nice.
They are alphabetical by their first name.
Oh, by their of course.
Mac Montoya, who's very difficult to see because he's a black dog, and Mario Wilkes.
Mario.
We have Max Kavanaugh and Patches Brown. Phoebe Seeger and Pippa Waller.
That's not the name Pippa for a dog.
And Rando Marks and Winnie Colano. Again, hard to see, but there are better pictures out in the hallway.
We could have turned the lights out.
So before we do the big reveal, let me tell you a few things I did learn about our dog.
She's really.
Going to the commercial break.
I feel like I'm at the Oscars.
The most popular names for our dogs in Wenham is the name Daisy, followed by a tie with Maisie and Charlie. So if your dog doesn't end with a Y-ish type thing, I guess that's not very popular. The top breeds for Wenham, probably no surprise to anybody, are Labs, followed by the mixed breed. I think we used to call them mutts.
No.
They're mixed breeds now, followed by the third
Designer
popular
breeds.
is terriers.
Designer breeds.
Designer breeds. Designer breeds.
Like a Labradoodle or something like
Right.
that?
Exactly.
Like a Morky Poo.
Like a Morky
What was that again, Captain?
Morky Poo. Maltese, Yorkshire Terrier,
Or
Poodle.
Lab
Exists.
Basset. Lab Basset. Bassador, I'm sorry, the Bassador.
Oh, that's great.
That's what Walter was, the
That's
Bassador.
great.
So before I mention now who the winner is, I'd like to introduce Lisa Kane. She's going to come up. Lisa is the owner of Wags Doggy Daycare, a Wenham establishment, and she has graciously
Whoa, that was heavy.
donated
Oh, cool.
this basket for the winning dog.
Wow, that's cool stuff.
Tons of stuff. Well, I don't think the dog has to go in the basket, but
Mine could.
so Lisa, if you could
Both
hold
of
your
them.
heavy basket.
I will hold the heavy basket.
And again, I want to thank everybody who registered their dogs, registered on time, brought them in to be in the contest, for the Board of Selectmen for allowing us this few moments, which they thought was going to be like 1 second, and all of
the
Town
most
Hall,
fun of the whole
who
meeting.
allowed us
Sorry,
to take
Water
over all of
Commissioner.
Town Hall
Downhill
with
from
dogs for 2 weeks.
How did they select the cutest dog?
Oh, I'm sorry, how did they select? They voted. Anyone who came into Town Hall was allowed to pick a number of a dog and put it in the ballot box.
Secret ballot, right?
Paper ballot.
Paper ballots, right?
Secret paper ballot.
Secret ballot.
Great.
Mr. George Kilpatrick and his dad, Mr. Russell Kilpatrick.
Bountiful harvest there. Yeah. And you're allowed to love it all.
He's now 95 pounds, so he's
Oh, so this is a puppy picture.
Great.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll stop by the shop and.
Awesome.
Turn around. So gotta get a picture for the.
So
Should have
the
had the
last
dog.
thing I did want to mention is for the top 12, I made a calendar featuring all of your dogs.
She's so
And you will be getting them in the next 2 weeks when they come in.
And the rest
They
of us
will
can
still
buy
be
them.
fenced. Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Good job registering
Nice.
your dog.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you for your donation. That was really great.
It's really a pleasure.
It was really great. That stuff is expensive. That stuff is so expensive. Shoes and everything. No, you don't have to stay for the rest of it. Okay.
We've already conducted all the important business we're going to do for the evenings.
That's true.
Yeah.
And you
Is there a motion to adjourn, Jack?
Whatever we do now is going to be anticlimactic.
Yeah, budget town meeting, you know.
Whatever. Increases for selectmen's pay.
Okay.
All right. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was great. That was very fun.
Yeah. Okay, next on the agenda, we have recycle your button cell batteries. I was learning about this afternoon. Oh, that's you.
That's me.
That's good. I'm glad you have that one.
So, as Jack said, we have the ability, I guess, to recycle our button cell batteries. Those are the flat batteries that you find in some items. Batteries can be dropped off with the Board of Health or Council on Aging. For every pound of batteries recycled, that seems like a lot of batteries. Someone's probably calculated how many that is. The Friends of the Wenham Council on Aging will receive $100 for programming and events. Some of the events sponsored by the Friends of the COA, a little public service announcement. 1640 Hart House Holiday Luncheon, the Wenhamite Newsletter, Painting with Aaliyah, and many more. Questions can be directed to the Wenham Board of Health at 978-468-5520, extension 4, or permitting at wenhamma.gov. So that there are two drop-off locations. They'll be obvious from this picture. They will be very obvious when you see them. If you go to the Board of Health office or the permitting office on the second floor, there's a box there for recycling, and also at the Wenham Council on Aging on School Street. It doesn't have any beginning and end date, so I guess it's just forever.
Ongoing program, yep, that we've set up through Wheelabrator, which is where we dispose of our waste. And we actually had a bulk donation to kick off the program, and had 4 pounds of these batteries donated so far. So we've got $400 going to the Friends of the Council on
That's your
Aging.
hearing aid batteries and your,
right.
and your Carbob batteries.
Right.
Your lithium batteries.
Right. Interesting. Digital organizers, calculators, cameras, watches. I'm just reading what things that kind of. Okay, so that's batteries.
Okay.
We have so many services. We do. Especially recycling ones. Okay.
Peter.
Just a few items to update on since our meeting last week. Regional dispatch, we talked about that at the February 6th meeting. The audit results were released last week. There was a big article in the Salem News and a whole bunch of other regional newspapers today about it that summarized the findings in the executive summary that were very consistent with our discussion back earlier in the month. So following up on that discussion, obviously the board expressed a willingness to try to see if there was interest for both Hamilton and Danvers in terms of working on a feasibility study to look at those alternatives. Since then, in the past few weeks, I've met with the town managers from both communities. On the Hamilton side, their Board of Selectmen and FinCom supported moving forward.
Which town are you referring to now?
Hamilton.
Okay.
With the feasibility study looking at us essentially going back to the regional model that we had in place for many years. And Danvers Board of Selectmen's meeting tonight, but this is something that is one of their top 5 goals for the year in terms of finding a partner community to work on regional dispatch with. So anticipate hearing affirmatively that they want to move forward as well. I've talked to MRI, and I've got a meeting set up with them next week to really kind of develop a scope of work that then I'll be bringing back to the board sometime in March. And in the meantime, we obviously continue to do what we can with the rec, and we've got a board meeting this Friday with our preliminary look at the FY19 budget. And right now the subsidy for the Sheriff's Department is a little less than $500,000. based on that budget. So they've obviously gotten that number down pretty considerably. That assumes, rightly, that Amesbury still will be making their cherry sheet contributions. FY19 will be the last year they do that. And the budget is built on the same level of cherry sheet revenues from all 5 communities as we have this year, which basically means that our assessment is going to stay the same at that $82,000 a year.
So MRI would be potentially looking at 2 options, a Wenham Hamilton option and a Wenham Danvers option?
Correct.
No other?
No other iteration at this time.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And obviously, a lot of work was done last summer with the feasibility study that they did for Danvers, looking at Hamilton and Manchester joining. And there's a whole lot of precedent history for what it looked like when the 2 towns were combined.
Okay.
Water Commission's here tonight. Wanted to touch on the fact that I had mentioned in September that we had, so I guess backing up a year and a half ago, we put in for grant funding through Mass DEP, their SWME Sustainable Water Management Initiative program. We're awarded just over $100,000 along with Danvers, Middleton, Topsfield, Hamilton, and Linfield Center to look at some potential regional solutions to the constraints that we have here in the Ipswich River Basin. They produced a report with a host of different recommendations. The group at the time, that was over last summer, the thought was that really need to do some deeper dive analysis on some of those recommendations in particular. So we put in a grant application in for the next round of funding in September. We just found out a few weeks ago that same group of 6 entities was awarded $160,000 in grant funding to do this next phase of work. So there is a local match component. It's not going to be any more than $4,500. And really, the bulk of this study is looking at supply side solutions as opposed to continued conservation measures, because we pretty well documented what we were already doing as part of that report that was produced over the summer. So we'll be working through a report. It's a very strict timeline. Unfortunately, in some ways, the grant funding goes based on the calendar year. So the project's got to be done again by the end of June. So we'll have a report again in the early summer with the findings from that work. And the last update is another long ongoing project. We were awarded $30,000 in technical assistance from the Central Transportation Planning staff, which is really the planning arm of MassDOT, and to look at our downtown corridor from Cherry Street to Arbor Street. They've collected a fair amount of data at this point. We had our kickoff meeting last week. And they plan to move forward with their initial assessment and preliminary design work in the next few months. We'll have some recommendations for us in April, and then expect to have a final report in the early summer, because that's based on the state fiscal year as well. And they've been, very open-minded and willing. They're not coming in it with kind of a state draconian mentality. They want to work with the town and understand not just what the modeling tells them, but what the boots on the ground did. And actually, some of their staff came in a couple hours before the meeting and just were kind of present and walking around and looking at it, anecdotally, as opposed to just looking at the data. And so it seems like it'll be a good process, and we'll have something to take out of it that'll help us moving forward with MassDOT on next steps. I would guess, based on the early discussions, is that they'll probably be recommending a traffic signal somewhere in that stretch, and maybe more than one. I wouldn't expect more than two, but again, they're going to really come to us with their initial recommendations and then work through the next couple of months before they complete their final report. That's it.
That's it.
Yep.
I don't have any comments. You want to take over for the first item on new business? Appointments?
Sure. We have an open position on the Board of Registrars. Let's see if what I have here. It talks about that. We have had a Republican registrar move out of town, so we need to find an interested person to complete that term. The term runs through March 31st, 2020. The law stipulates that the Republican committee needs to submit 3 names to the Board of Selectmen for this appointment, which they have done. So we received 3 initially, I think, 3 letters of interest, and 1 that has changed that person's mind. So we have 2 letters of interest from 2 people who are interested in serving on the Board of Registrars. And I guess we're supposed to pick one, although frankly, I don't know either one of them.
Is either applicant here tonight?
Dan Curran.
Stand up if you are, please.
And
Sit down now. Okay. Guess not. So what do you want to do?
So I mean, throw a dart?
You have a quarter?
I think
I mean, I
maybe
did.
Yeah?
I did ask middle end of last week, you know, if any of the other, or any of the 3 at the time, residents could give more, you know, background information about themselves and why they're interested in serving in that role, and I haven't gotten any more information back for the board to help you make your decision.
Let me delay it till the next
I
meeting.
think it's a great idea, because it would be a random thing
walk.
for me.
And maybe one or both could show up for the next meeting and that express verbally their interest
Yeah,
at the podium and say why they want to be a registrar or not. And that if one shows up and the other doesn't, well, I guess that's our pick. No?
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Got a better solution?
No, I don't.
All right. That's it for that then. The Water Commission, recommendation to not renew our Mass DEP water withdrawal permit, and that guys want to get up and we have a
Good luck with this.
hell of a lot of material in here, but I'm sure you can summarize it for us.
We're counting on you summarizing it, because it.
Please.
You didn't read the Cliff Notes?
I read
Well, I have a
every-
one-page clip note here. It's
I read every
1, 2, 3,
page.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11
Talking about
items.
the cover memo.
Oh,
Yeah, and I appreciate Superintendent Mansfield and Administrator Lombardi putting together this, because it does really go into pretty detail on something that is confusing. There's terms of registrations and permits and thresholds and other things. But if I can explain it, we have 0.29 million gallons a day as a registered amount that we are allowed to pump. In addition to that, we have, and all towns have, a 1.1 million gallon a day
Threshold volume.
threshold volume that you can pump again above that. So the 2 of them equate to 0.39 million gallons a day. Now, we have always been able to pump underneath that on average, except for a 2-year period, and at that point, Mass DEP required that we got a permit. So now we are in a period where they are renewing permits throughout the Ipswich River Basin, as well as other basins in Massachusetts. And they have provided us with information about their new draft permit. And the understanding is that it would start out at 0.39, so the equivalent, but it would scale back at minimum 2024, if not before then, to 0.37 or 0.35 or something lower than the 0.39. And with Massachusetts permits often come conditions, and conditions for additional conservation measures that could be communication to residents, or it could be cutting back or improving stormwater recharge and other conservation measures. Because we are a town on entirely septic systems, and we have done quite a bit of communication already, we don't know that there are a whole lot of additional steps that we could take as low-hanging fruit in being able to do that. So the commission discussed this issue, and the alternative is that we not renew this permit. And with that, we will still have our registration value of 0.29 and our threshold value, which is afforded to all towns, of 0.1. So the value of 0.39 that we will be able to pump would stay the same if we did not get the permit. And there would not be the potential for conditions that go along with such a permit. So at one point we communicated with town council, and they thought that they might be able to take away that registration value, but if they did, they would have to take it away from all towns, because it is applicable for all towns. So the commission discussed the matter and felt that it was appropriate to consider not renewing that permit. We received an order to complete a questionnaire from the Mass DEP within a certain time frame. Much of the information from that would be incorporated in their considerations of our permit. We asked for an extension of that long enough so that we could provide a briefing to the selectmen and have this discussion tonight, because we felt like it would be inappropriate for us to provide all the information and have Mass DEP review all of this and then say, well, never mind, we're not really interested in the permit after all. So we want to be straightforward with Mass DEP as well. But that is my understanding of it, as our recommendation is that we would go ahead and exist without a permit and maintain all of the conservation measures that I think we want to perform anyway. As I mentioned, the only time when we have a challenge with that permitting threshold, and if we exceeded the 0.39 on an average, then we surely expect Mass DEP will enforce the need for a permit. But we really only run up into that during the summer, when we have excessive irrigation, and we have put in place in this past year the ability for an enforceable ticket and other means that we believe will be helpful in encouraging water conservation for the summer. So, Eric, is there something to add?
The registration, our registration also does come with some conditions, which are we need to meet some standards of unaccounted for water and also residential gallons per person per day. So we still have some conditions that we need to meet just for our registration, but in order for us to maybe meet a permit requirement, we may have to look at maybe purchasing water from maybe Beverly Salem to be able to meet if we go up against our permit levels.
I mean, purchasing the ability to pump water, and you're not going to actually get water from Beverly Salem, right?
Well, if we cannot get our numbers below what DEP is requiring, we have to somehow offset the amount of water we are using, and that would.
But it's a paper entry. It's not. You're not actually going to.
No, we would actually have to purchase water from Beverly Salem.
How would you get it?
We'd have to come to an agreement. We have an interconnection with them.
Oh, okay.
And they would be the only source available to us that wasn't also pumping out of the Ipswich River Basin during the summer months.
So listening to you, I don't hear or see a downside. So why would any town or city in this district want to renew their DEP?
Some cities and towns are required to. If you install a new source, if let's say we went and put a new well in, we would be required to get a permit, but it would be a 0-gallon permit. But you would fall under the new regulations.
Well, if you weren't required to do that, though, why would there's no advantage in basically, from what I'm listening to you, in applying for a permit, and right? There's no downside.
So it's coincidental that our permit and our registered amount are the same number. That's not the case for all the communities in the Amsterdam River Basin.
I see.
Okay, now I'm even more.
So some of these are higher, and so that if we had a higher threshold, you might be encouraged to apply for it. Is that the idea?
Yes.
But in our case, it's not the same, it's the same,
Right now, it's exactly the same.
yeah.
So,
The permit's only going to be decreased going forward. In fact, when Eric and I met with DEP a couple months ago and talked about any potential increase in our permitted volume, he said that we'd have to apply for a new permit. It couldn't be done under our existing
they said
permit.
that here. So I guess I'm just, well, I'm a little confused just initially. There's so many terms here.
Yeah.
So you said our registered rate, which is sort of the statutory rate, is
Yeah.
0.29.
Yeah, 290,000 gallons per day.
But the permitted rate, which would be added to that, is 0.1.
Yes.
Is that a
So it
hun-
would be 0.39 total.
Right.
And that threshold amount is true for every water supplier, every
Yes.
entity that,
So, but even, I think what I understood was even if we did not have a permit for this 10,000, we would have a buffer, I don't know what it's called, in excess of the 0.29 regardless.
We could pump up to 0.39 per day without being in
Without
violation.
without being in violation. So when I saw that you were talking about not renewing the permit, I tried to find, and I found one thing, and I'm going to ask for if there are any others, what the downside was of not having a permit. Our council seemed to be a little concerned that if we don't renew our permit and then our water goes up, it'll be hard to get a permit. I don't know if that's true or not. But they did talk about somewhere, which I now can't find, something about if the DEP has a little bit more power, I guess, or regulation ability in a drought with towns that don't have permits. They have the ability to regulate, to actually come in and regulate water more. I wish I could find.
I think, so if you have a permit, you're already going to be under those conditions. If you
Right.
do not have a permit, you don't have to follow the drought protocol. So DEP at that point can come in if they do declare a drought and say, even with the cities and towns who do not hold permits, you need to follow the same rules, which is what happened 2 years ago.
So we wouldn't be held to a more stringent standard than we're already used to. I mean, what that's really talking about is the Beverly Salem Water or other registered users that the state could then impose the kind of conditions that we're all used to because we've been operating under a permit for all these years.
So we should assume that even if we don't have a permit and we're just using the registered amount, that we would continue our own
We have a
personal.
bylaw.
It's codified in our bylaws.
Yeah,
the-
it doesn't
the
change
bans.
what we're going to do.
And,
Correct.
and they don't seem to, the timing of those, which was new to me, doesn't seem to coincide with when the DEP would require it to happen. You know, they talk about they average, if a withdrawal is something over 4 days, then it would trigger the ban. We just seem to do that on May 1st.
Yeah.
And so we would continue to do that.
Yep. Our policies wouldn't change. We still need to look at reducing overall water usage in town. We want to be able to continue to allow growth in town. I don't think we want to stop that. So, I mean, we still need to be aggressive as far as restricting water use. And,
Yeah, and that's the reason why we continue to be involved in the SWIMMY grant program because, even if we're just falling back on our registration, hard to say, what the future's going to look like 5-10 years out with DEP and the basin in general, so.
Because we do bump up against our, I don't know how,
total.
the scale of these numbers is, oh my God, we're going to bump up into it tomorrow, or if this is like unlikely to go from 0.36 to 0.39. But we are on the high end of that total.
Which is why if you look at when DEP sent their order to complete, they basically say, you're at 0.39, we're going to step it down to 0.37, 0.35. And we recognize that you're probably going to be out of compliance right away if we do decrease it to that amount.
And
So that's what we're looking at.
then what?
And then they would ask for more conservation measures, and we find that after doing what we have done, those would be very limited, our ability to make more conservation.
And potentially fines. If you can't conserve your way out of it, I mean, that's something that would be on the table.
and also, if you want to look at it at a yearly number, the number we can pump up against is 141 million gallons. This year, past year, we were at 118 million gallons. So, I mean, we do have play there.
The prior year, we were close.
A couple years ago, we
We were
were up against
closer.
it, but we did find that we had a leak that was undetected for a while.
So you don't see any downsides for us, even potential downsides to just going with our registered number, not having a permit to it?
I don't. I mean, we're allowed that 100,000 anyways.
Right.
If so yes, if it was above that, we would probably be looking at our permit, so we would be able to keep that number above 100,000 gallons per day. But at this point, we're allowed 100,000 gallons whether we have a permit or not.
I mean, the one concern is mentioned in the memo, and I think is in some of the supporting documentation, is this idea that there are lobby groups, watershed associations
Yeah.
that have requested DEP to consider reducing that base
Right.
registration amount, that
Right.
$100,000 or 100,000
gallon.
gallons
Threshold volume.
a day. Yeah, the threshold volume, excuse me. But doing so would cast a much wider net in terms of what they would have to regulate, because that number is set for a reason.
Right.
So it would, and they've basically said that their response back recently
Right.
was that we can't justify it because it's very narrowly, they're allowed to, but only to protect public health and safety, and they say there isn't documentation to support that.
But for now, it's a no-brainer. They might change the rules next year, the year after, whatever. We have to pay attention to the, you use the word irrigation in the summer, which I've been trying to, every single meeting in July and August, and then we need to be a little more forceful about it. But right now, there's no downside in this, and that we'd be idiots to basically go for the permit, right? We're not idiots.
Well, I don't think I would call it a no-brainer, actually.
Why is it a no-brainer?
Well, because it's a very complicated issue, and I think these guys have spent a lot of time trying to figure out if there are downsides, upsides.
But the bottom line is it's a no-brainer.
That's your opinion, Jack.
Well, is it,
I
what
think it-
reservations do you have then?
Well, I didn't say I had reservations. I just said it's not a no-brainer because it required, for me, some thought. And there's a lot of information.
You're not a water commissioner, they are.
I know,
so
thank
they're-
God.
And
Thank
we did
God.
also check, not just with town council, but with Mass Waterworks Association, right? We've been working with Jen Peterson, who's their executive director, on a number of different projects, and they're clearly looking at trends across the state, and that's again more sort of supporting documentation that we use to come to the.
So I presume the vote of the commission was unanimous?
Yes, it was.
Again, a no-brainer. Okay. thank
And
you.
we're not the only city or town that's giving up our permits.
That's true.
That's interesting.
There's I know a couple towns that are in discussion right now, and there's a couple that have already just given their permits up.
I think Wellesley and
Because,
Needham? Needham.
of the onerous nature of the conditions, and they don't,
And they're in a
And
similar
they're
position to
under-
us in terms of their
they're-
permit and registration.
it sounds like this registration deadline and permitting deadline keeps getting pushed out anyway, at least what I was reading. Sounded like the permit that we have right now expired in
original permit expired in
2006.
2008.
And it's been, maybe, keep every year. And now it seems like it's indefinitely.
But we are, in many ways, the poster child for the state, Ipswich River Basin. And so we're one of the first that are actually going through, that are going through first basins that are going through this renewal process. So I think there's only one or two others.
You want to introduce the other two water commissioners, I see them right there, they don't get on TV very often, so that,
If I may, when we first met with DEP probably 6 months ago, if not longer, to have our initial discussions, they acknowledged the almost absurdity of the permit, that we would almost immediately be in a violation condition, and acknowledged this is not something we really want to pursue, so.
again, a no-brainer.
So-
It was entirely, after extensive discussion.
Yeah, I'm going to keep talking. Just say, every time you say that, I'm going to ask another
It's a
question.
no-brainer, it's a no-brainer, it's a
So
no-brainer.
now there's one other question renewing this permit in particular doesn't make sense. In the future, if the regs change or the law, I guess the regulations change, and we need more water, we're going to have to apply for a new permit anyway.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
correct?
Even if we had this permit, if we were pumping above that threshold, we would have to apply for a new permit.
Which DEP is telling us is,
They're probably not
probably
going to
deny
give
it.
anybody any permits.
even though we may likely be above,
Yeah.
especially if they lower the thresholds.
Yeah.
So we'll be above the threshold, won't have a permit, but we can't get a permit.
We think we
Right.
can maintain
But that's the
below
same
that.
situation if we renewed this permit, because,
And we, DCR does water needs forecasting, the state agency that's charged with that for whatever reason, I don't know the history there.
culture
but-
and recreation,
Yeah.
that was a new one to me too.
But Eric and I, they did their preliminary calculations. Eric and I sat down with them and tried to make the case to increase that number to at least justify staying at the 0.39, and ultimately didn't get anywhere with that either, so.
Okay.
So our action as the Water Commission would be to instruct Superintendent Mansfield to inform the DEP that we will not fill out the order to complete questionnaire, and that our intent is not to renew the permit.
Sounds good to me. I don't see the vote in here, though, right?
There isn't, it was, as Catherine referenced, a fairly complicated issue, generally, and so
Not
we
as they
did-
explained it to me,
so
anyway.
so I didn't want to
So we wanted to
put
bring.
a motion, presuppose and put a motion in there tonight.
So this is a recommendation by the Water Commission to the Board of Selectmen? I guess that's my
The Board of
question.
Selectmen and the town administrator, who the permit requirement is issued to.
Yeah, so
Okay.
with I think as the chief elected official, technically,
Right.
the decision is the Board of Selectmen's, obviously based on the recommendation of the Water Commission.
So just to be clear, I don't have an issue with this. I just think it's complicated and it's important for us to understand.
It's complicated, it does, it
And-
gets confusing between registration
Right,
permits.
and I would never propose to imagine I could understand to the level you guys are, but I do have questions about it, and I think it's important for us and for the community to at least understand why we're making the decisions. This headline, if this came out as a headline in the news, people would be worried about it till they understood.
And if we didn't have the bylaw in place already, it may be
Right.
something that we would have to do,
Right, okay.
but we already have that in place.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Do we need to take any other action, Peter? Do you recommend we take any more action, like vote?
Sure.
Do you recommend that?
The board could certainly vote tonight if you feel comfortable with it, and I don't have a,
I don't think there's any more information I could have on it.
right?
I move that we accept the recommendation of the Water Commissioner to not fill in the blanks.
Renew our water withdrawal.
Right.
Yep.
Do I hear a second?
Second, just in that motion, do we have to refer to any particular water permit, or is there just one?
There's only one water withdrawal permit that the town holds. There aren't multiple. The registration is separate, so.
Okay, so I seconded it.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for coming, guys.
Thank you very much. It's gonna be a long meeting.
Hey, on the way out the door, though, I think when June comes or July comes, I really would like to get frequent information from your committee about how we're doing in terms of, particularly if it doesn't rain for a while, and that, because that's when we really have issues and problems, and that I, for one, selectman, would like to do everything I can to vigorously enforce, if you do declare a water ban, which you do every year on May 1st anyway, you got those sandwich boards out, and that to see if we can really enforce by visual inspection and fines for those few property owners who just ignore it. And that, and I think that we owe it to everyone else in town who is abiding by these water restrictions to enforce it for everybody. So that communication to Peter and that, which he can relay to us, would be helpful, again, when mid-June, July, whenever.
Yeah, I think that would be a very good idea. As Eric mentioned, our bylaw does start May 1st through September, that there's no outside watering during the 9 to 5 period when most all of it would evaporate. But once the Ipswich River drops below a specific level, we have to issue an actual water ban. And it's at that point that we really want to make sure that people are paying attention to it. And now we have mechanisms. And typically, we want to actually see the wet pavement in the morning and understand that that person has been watering. We have issued letters in the past Now we'll follow those up after the initial contact with letters to actually provide the ticket, which has some weight.
Right, and we can go further than that as well. But, so I think that we'd like to help you and help the town, basically not go over the permitting, particularly if we have a drought like we had a couple of years ago, where, and that I think, I'm not going to speak for the police, I think that they have the midnight 8 shift, whatever it is, that they can go around town, you know, on the QT tell you, you know, oh, saw a sprinkler going, so maybe we can get them to assist us. And we don't want to make them water police, but nevertheless that they can pass on observations they make in their rounds that we can effectively use to basically send out these warning letters initially.
Very good. And I'll sit down with Peter also, and we'll come up with a plan for that.
You know, and also on your way out, if I'm reading the writing on the wall correctly, this work that's being done with this grant to ultimately figure out how we can get more water, I think is going to be vital, because I think as we grow, we're going to have to find water from some other source unless something dramatic happens with the Ipswich patient. Right. So this regional approach seems to be, you know, so I'd be interested in ongoing information on that too. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you next year. Okay, Peter, renew of the recommendations of the annual town meeting warrant. You wrote a memo.
A couple of them.
A couple of them, that's right. Well, why don't you talk about the one you wrote in here when it's in our book, which is dated today. Summarize it before we go into the articles.
Sure.
One at a time.
So there's my memo, and then there's, right after that, a slide deck that's a slightly updated version of what Leslie and I presented to the FinCom at their meeting last Thursday when they were reviewing all the finance-related articles, and particularly the budget. So at this point, you know, delivered a level services budget on the town side, and town expenses have increased by 3.7%. That is up from obviously what we talked about fairly recently. But just by way of explanation, it's really more representative of a 2.2% increase from FY18 to 19. 1% of that increase is directly tied back to the shared inspectional services, which we obviously, as the lead community, are carrying the full cost for on the expense side. It's being offset by, you know, revenues for the assessment from Hamilton, but it looks on the expense side like a major increase. Another 0.5% is we funded our contribution to the OPEB trust fund from free cash. This year, for next year, we've incorporated that $40,000 cost into the operating budget. So again, that's a 1.5% of that 3.7% increase. So there's a detail sheet right after the memo that summarizes, should look familiar. It's something we've used in a number of different presentations over the past several years. It shows budget to budget for the past, for FY15 to 17, projected for this year, or budgeted for this year, and then projected for next year, a percentage change from 18 to 19, and then a percentage change from 15 to 19, so showing the trend over the past, in terms of changes over the past 4 fiscal years. So it's broken out by different service area, and really at a high level, the takeaway from that chart is that our town operating budget expense increases have gone up by about 2.6% on average over the past 4 years. Over that same span of time, the school operating budget has increased by just over 4%, so that's independent of the $1 million in enrollment shift costs. That's just their operating expense increases over that period of time. So the school committee last week approved their FY19 budget, which amounts to operating expense increase of 6.9%. Based on, after you account for the enrollment shift, it's actually a 9.2% increase in our assessment. And that includes level services, which is a little over 3.5%, the $400,000 in critical priorities that were identified by the superintendent at the start of their budget process, and then a reduction in user fees of $177,000 on the revenue side, basically cutting user fees in half across the board for next year. So where that leaves us relative to our levy limit, it puts us $331,000 over our levy limit. It's just over an $8.5 million budget for next year within the levy, and then another $331,000 above the levy. So obviously we, with our being that far over the levy limit, if you extrapolate looking at our about 35% assessment rate on our side, the schools would have to cut just over $1 million out of their operating budget to come in within our levy limit. Obviously, there are some components that might make up that $1 million, including the critical priorities and the user fees. But we've asked for information from the school district, from their leadership, from the school committee about what would happen if the operating override were to fail, and we don't have details about that. So it would really just be an assumption that those two pieces would make up some portion of that $1 million at this point. And then we can get into the debt exclusion piece separately.
But tonight, you're looking for us to go through one by one, Article 1, 2, so on and so forth,
Correct.
and to vote, to put in the warrant book. The FinCom has already voted on all of these, and that, so it's Catherine and I, and so I was discussing, I should have mentioned earlier this evening that our third selectman, John Clemency, is ill tonight and couldn't join us. We have a posted meeting for tomorrow night to discuss differences with the FinCom, if indeed we have any. And so it may be necessary to revote some of these if John joins us tomorrow night, or if not. Certainly on a 2-0 vote, maybe not, but if we have a 1-1 vote, it'd be nice to have a tiebreaker here so that if indeed it comes to that, I don't know. And that because obviously with the open meeting like Catherine and I have not discussed these in advance.
Absolutely not.
Shake your head like this so the camera can get it.
They know.
Anyway, so that we're playing this by ear a little bit. We'd like to have all three selectmen vote on each of the articles, whether or not it's all unanimous or not, but nevertheless, it's a little bit of an impediment to only have 2 votes here, and that, but we'll just see what happens, and let's go through, and that, starting with Article 1.
Jack, before you get going, I did want to make a note. I think it's somewhere in the memo. Basically, what the town can accommodate within our levy limit budget, which is Article 1, is a 2.5% operating expense increase for the school district. So everything above that,
It's an override.
Is an override. Yeah.
Plus they did exclusions.
And the other thing that I will note is that there was obviously some discussion about how Hamilton was going to structure their warrant articles. And at their joint budget meeting last week, they decided to mirror our same approach to avoid any further confusion. And essentially, they are going to include a 2.5% operating expense increase from the schools in their Article 1 budget and a separate warrant article for the balance of the assessment above that.
So Article 1 assumes, or is structured, excuse me, doesn't assume, it's structured that up to our levy limit, we can afford the most of the school budget, but not the items you've already mentioned a few minutes ago. And the FinCom has already voted 5-0 in favor of the school budget, with the assumption that it's capped at what Peter just said a minute ago, which is basically excluding the 2 items in the override, which would be the $177,000 reduction in user fees and the $400,000 in critical priorities.
I don't think that's...
Am I mixing that up with the dead?
No, you're not.
No, you're
No,
just
but-
making a sort of a rational assumption, which I don't think we can make.
Right, we've said, you know, what comprises that $1 million if it were to fail? And the school leadership has not given us that information, so we can assume that it's those critical priorities and user fees, but that's totally an assumption.
Fine.
And I think an important assumption, truthfully, important point to make, because we asked,
I know.
and they are not telling us what would be in the override. We said, oh, well, maybe it's the, but we don't have that information from the school committee. So I think at this point, we have no idea what would be in the override. We just know the total number.
And I think that was part of the, unfortunately, the audio wasn't recorded for the finance committee meeting last Thursday night, but that was a good part of the dialogue that the FinCom brought up in deliberating and ultimately voting the way they did against favorable action on Article 3, was in part on not really understanding what would happen if the override were to fail, what comprised that override figure.
And nevertheless, these are the two items they came up with, I won't say at the last minute. Certainly the reduction in user fees was last minute, and the critical priorities was not quite last minute, but was right around the corner from that. And that we certainly didn't get any indications past last fall that they would be asking for this, and so that indeed we had other indications. In any event, we're budgeting this up to the levy limit. The FinCom had said 5-0 in favor of it. They only have 5 members. What do you think?
I think we've had enough information on Article 1 that there's nothing really more to say about that. We understand.
Okay, so we can vote on it then?
Yep.
Okay. I move that we accept Article 1 as described.
So can I just, I think to go through all these individually, because it was our last discussion about all the different warrant articles was essentially kind of straw polling, understanding whether they would still be in the mix or not. So I think it'd be helpful to say to place Article 1 on the warrant and recommend favorable action, and then
Place Article 1 on the warrant and recommend favorable action.
there we go.
I can parrot that. That's pretty good. That's how you get to be a selectman.
I second that.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Use of free cash to balance the budget and level the tax rate. Again, we have a 5-0 vote of the FinCom in favor of this. Discussion?
Nope, I think we've had a lot of discussion.
We
I
wanna
feel
do
very well versed on the budget.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to put Article 2 on the warrant and recommend favorable action by the Board of Selectmen.
Second, all in favor? Aye. School operating override. The FinCom has voted 4-1 against this article.
Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like.
And that, which is, see what sum of money, namely $331,924, et cetera, and that, you want to comment on this?
Well, I guess I was looking forward to hearing what they said. I don't know that would change my vote, but I guess I'm...
They meaning the FinCom?
The FinCom, yeah, without audio was tricky. So I guess I would ask the person who voted for.
That'd be Mr. Purdy.
Okay. And did he have a reason?
I think the idea that he supported was that he thought that ultimately that it should go to the ballot, that the residents of the community should have an opportunity to vote on the school operating override. Is that fair to say, Leslie? That's it.
I agree with that, and I think that putting it on as an article on the warrant is appropriate.
It's already on the warrant.
It's very surreal for me, I have to tell you, to be on the other side of this, having been through 10 years of overrides on the school committee. However, we have I'm going to be totally blunt, we have shockingly little information from them. And to be able to recommend favorable action on an override that we have no idea what our kids would lose if it passes or fails, doesn't work for me. So yeah, it's on there. I would vote to put it on, but I would not recommend favorable action. So that's maybe 2 motions. which I'm happy to make.
Wait a minute, hold up. We're gonna alternate in this one so that
Okay.
you made the last one, so I'm gonna do this one. It's already on we have a warrant article in here. It's Article 3. The only question right now is,
Right.
do we recommend favorable action or not? Am I correct?
No, so it's not technically on the warrant yet. This is the first time we're deciding affirmatively that each article is going on the warrant. So
Okay.
it does need a.
So it's a two-part vote. A, should we put it on the warrant?
Right.
And then secondly, what's our action? Okay. I recommend we put it on the warrant,
I would second that.
and I recommend against it.
Well,
I recommend unfavorable action, not favorable action,
well,
consistent with the FinCom's vote.
so I agree, but do we need that in two separate votes? Or are we putting it on the warrant and recommending unfavorable action?
We do it in one vote.
I just want to be clear, because,
Well-
people are going to really look at this. It's,
I'm recommending, let's take it in two votes then. I'm recommending that we put this on the warrant.
I would second that
All in
recommendation.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Now, secondly, are we in favor of this or not? So I'm voting that I'm not in favor of this, consistent with the FinCom's 4-1 recommendation.
And I would second that motion
All in favor? Aye. I
Aye.
think we got through that.
to the
Unfavorable action.
So it's, okay.
or is it unfavorable action, or is it favorable action?
With a
to
0-2.
Yeah, 0-2.
I think for having it kind of structured the same, it probably should be a favorable action 0-2.
The way it's written.
No.
Confusing everybody.
Well, you need to say the same thing with
So I
both.
think that's probably something that we can get through tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the way that the Finance Committee voted was 1-4 against favorable action.
Right.
So I think however it's set up with both committees, I think you want to be consistent in how it's structured.
Right.
That's all.
But we
I
know
think a
the,
1-4 is awkward. I'd rather see the thing 4-1 against. It should be, instead of 1-4, what does that mean? I
Well, I
have to
think
think
we
about
can
it.
talk about that tomorrow night.
and I,
And
yeah.
make sure that both boards are aligned.
Well, whatever, the majority of the committee, whatever the decision is, like 5-0, 4-1, should be 4-1, for or against, as opposed to 1-4. And so that gets confusing. I had to look at that 1-4. What do they mean?
And I have no preference, I just think they should be the same.
Yeah.
Whatever format one uses, the other should use.
We understand that for tonight's purposes,
We know how we voted.
we know how we voted, and then we'll remedy it tomorrow night.
So I do have a question on that, though. This is the article. I presume that there would be a motion, well, there will be a motion attached to this, that will have language about contingent upon and a ballot and all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
So this is just the general warrant
The language
article.
for each of the articles is still draft form. This
Okay.
is not final version of the language. This is getting the information across.
Okay.
In a discussion I had with Peter this afternoon, I also recommended, although this is not usual, is to invite the leadership of the school administration to come to our warrant hearing. Since it's kind of confusing since they haven't given us some written answers as to what would happen if it didn't pass, perhaps the voting public would be able to, and this is televised, and so maybe and it's attended by sometimes a lot of people, sometimes not too many people, but the school administration will get an opportunity to explain their position and answer questions from the voting public prior to going to the town meeting, which I think would be helpful.
I agree.
And whether they actually accept that invitation or not, by the way, it's an invitation. I think it would be helpful. I don't know if Hamilton wants to do the same thing, and I've asked Peter to make sure that the town of Hamilton selectmen know and town manager knows that we're making that invitation, so they don't feel, well, how come you didn't tell us? We would have done the same thing, et cetera, so that whether they want to make the invitation or not.
Because it is not even though there will be two articles, the school budget will be separated in Article 1 and Article something, separate article in Hamilton. It does not require an override in Hamilton, correct?
Correct, but it requires a majority
Right. So,
approving at town meeting.
so it's, to your point, it would be a good idea to have invitations to both towns, because there's some explaining to do, override or not.
I think,
And
we
so
have good relationships currently with the town of Hamilton, the town of Hamilton manager, and I just want to make sure we have open communications, and we don't want them to feel like, gee, how come you didn't give us a heads up? That's a good idea. We'd like to do the same
Do
thing.
remember having to run from one to another to do those explanations, so it would not be uncommon for the school district to be present.
do they have the warrant hearing the same night we do?
They used to. I don't know if they do.
I don't know,
anymore.
I'll check.
Yeah. Okay, Article 4, debt exclusion, Winthrop School Fire Suppression System. Your turn.
Well, I guess the discussion first. So having listened and done a lot of research on this particular article, I don't think there's any choice. But I think it's been handled, there's been a lot of procrastination. This was something that was, I think, originally
4 years ago.
Mandated 4 years ago.
Right.
I don't really understand why it's just coming to town meeting now, and I've not seen anything that explains that. I know there have been a few steps in between. All that being said, though, the fire department in Hamilton says they need sprinklers, and this is what they're going to cost, so I don't think that we have much choice.
Well, I agree with you. Reluctantly, I do agree. I want to make sure everyone knows this regional school district committee voted 5-2 for this. There were 2 members that voted against it, and I believe their reasons were that they could have put money aside over the last 4 years to do this. Secondly, I read Bill Derry's article in the Chronicle, discussed it with Peter, and that there was a nuance I didn't understand, that yes, they could have appealed. The fire suppression system is there's a door you can walk out that's a lot better than going down the hall and so forth. Unfortunately, the regional school district had 45 days to appeal this decision, which the Derry article didn't mention, and that appeal process is long gone. So there is no formal appeal mechanism right now, although there was before, and the Hamilton Regional School District administration chose not to appeal it. And so now, going back to the original thing, it's there we go, and that dire consequences could happen if we don't. I guess it's required to. They were required to put this on the town warrants to vote. However, they're not required. If both towns turned it down, or one town turned it down, doesn't necessarily I don't know, the fire department in Hamilton can say, all right, we're not going to give you an occupancy permit. Who knows? But I think we have to approve this now for voting. But nevertheless, I think there's going to be some people get up at the podium and lament the fact that actions could have been taken to mitigate spending all this money, and that. But right now, I don't think we have any choice but to put it on.
No, and I think, if I'm correct on this, the town of Hamilton and the regional school district administration signed an intermunicipal agreement saying that this would be done, the work would be done by, I think, August of this year.
Right.
So based on that, it sounds to me that if this were not passed, the school district would have to come up with another way, unless
the school district is doing their job by having it on the warrant. If it doesn't pass, the school district's off the hook.
Well,
although they may not be off the hook if the fire department in Hamilton decides it's not going to. I don't know. But,
well, because I think the IMA does not say you have to put it on the warrant. I think the IMA says the work will be done by. But in any case.
Yeah, the IMA's been extended once.
Right.
Or I don't know if it's I think it's an MOA, actually, technically.
Might be.
But it's between the school district and the town of Hamilton, Hamilton Fire Department. And basically the 2 major conditions in it, one, the most recent iteration, as Jack mentioned, that both towns or the school committee puts a debt exclusion forward to town meeting this spring, and the deadline right now is by the end of August of 2019.
To actually have the work done.
To have the work done, correct.
So if it doesn't pass, they either have another shot at doing this next year at town meeting, or they've got to come up with the money to do it, or they have to convince Hamilton, oh, well, we don't have the money, so we don't have to do it. Are those the options?
Yeah, and I don't know that would likely be a case based on, I mean, the fire inspector
stood pretty firm on it.
Has looked at, interpreted the code and given his ruling, so I wouldn't foresee a change on that front.
Right. Article 5.
I would, I think I'd like to make a motion to put Article 4, the debt exclusion for this fire suppression system, on the warrant.
So we just did that.
We didn't. We didn't, we talked about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that's a yes.
that's a yes, second yes. Then, so that was the first motion. The second motion is whether or not we would like to recommend, the way we've been doing this, I guess, is we'll just keep voting the recommend favorable action on that.
And what's your vote? You cheated up? No.
I know, and
I'm
I'm
going to swing the bat.
well, I'm going to have to vote favorable action, I think, although I think I just registered my concerns, but yes, I would have to vote for
I think
favorable
we have to vote, I agree. I think we have to vote yes on this, and that reluctantly, if I can put that down. All in favor? Aye.
Put that in parentheses on the, in the warrant book.
Article 5, debt exclusion for the critical priorities, $2.6 million. This was a 5-0 favorable for the FinCom. By the way, I failed to mention that on Article 4 that we just voted on, the FinCom voted 5-0 for favorable action on that. So Article 5, debt exclusion of Hamilton Wenham Regional School District safety, accessibility, and critical infrastructure. $2.6 million is the debt exclusion. I recommend we put it on the warrant. That's the easy part.
Yeah, I'll
agree?
second that.
All in favor? Aye.
So if I may on that, there were two, because I watched a few of the school committee meetings, there were two debt exclusions. There have been for a long time. The second one was the turf field debt exclusion. And at the same meeting where they decided on the last meeting before they voted, they, for a variety of reasons, decided to take the
Turf field
off. This debt exclusion article was in their capital improvement plan for 2000. These items were in their plan for 2019. And
For 20.
For 20,
Yeah.
right. To vote.
Originally, they
Right.
were for 20. Yep.
And so I think what they did is just take that entire group of things and move them to this year.
And that's what Leslie
what
just
this is.
provided is the detail. I thought it was in the packets, but notice it wasn't. So that's the updated
I brought mine
5-year
from the-
CIP showing all those FY19 projects in there that comprise the 2.6 million.
February
And
February 13th is a slightly...
this is, I can't comment on all, I don't know, 35 things on here, nor is it my job to decide what they should have or not have. I would be interested, I don't feel, I have questions. I know, you can imagine that I would have questions.
shocking. It's shocking.
I know. And my lack of access to answers is troublesome to me, so I'm having a little difficulty with this. However, our FinCom voted in favor of it. Do you have any, again, without the benefit of having gone to that meeting, do you have any, can you summarize?
Yeah, I think the one thing I will say that I mentioned, I think Leslie might have as well, is that obviously we have our own 5-year CIP. We fund about $200,000 or so a year out of free cash. We fund another $100,000 to $150,000 in the operating budget in terms of keeping up with our capital needs. But if you look at our CIP, there's between $800,000 and $1 million of capital needs on any given fiscal year out over the next 5 years. If this school debt exclusion for all these different projects gets approved in 19, if you look out FY20 to FY22, essentially all their capital needs will be able to be accommodated within their operating budget. It's around $350,000 of capital needs a year. We talked about the fact that we used to be a committee that coordinated between the 3 towns in terms of our capital needs. My concern is that all of the major school capital needs for the next 4 fiscal years are met by approving this debt exclusion, and it deprioritizes in a lot of ways the town's capital needs, because they're kind of first in the queue, and so that's a concern that I had with this particular article, the way it's structured.
Yeah, for the listening audience, many of these are just, I would call routine, and that even the most expensive one on page 1 is that the mostly IT stuff, replace network storage area arrays, replace VMware server and licenses, replace backup server, replace phone system with new VoP system, replace network IDF, replace smart boards, replace tablets, iPads, things like that. Emergency generators, the biggie. Replace sprinkler heads, if I got that right. So, so it's 3.6 million, and that means we need to know if it didn't pass, what they do, and that I don't know, put it all to next year, or not replace these IT things, or whatever.
So I guess, is it 2.6 million?
3.6. I'm sorry, it's what?
It's 2.6.
2.6. Excuse me.
So the 19 includes.
Because it had the.
Correct. It's got that 3.6 that's all rolled up in 19 includes both the Winthrop sprinkler and the $150,000 or so that's in their operating budget for capital,
Right.
separate from the debt exclusion.
So it would be helpful, though, to have this column here. It would be helpful to have a line that shows exactly what the 2.6, we don't know that.
The color version does. And there's actually a tab on the bottom of the second page that says, you know, everything that's in orange adds up to the 2.6 right here. No, on this second page.
Yeah.
We just don't
There's a
have
note down the bottom that calls out, there's $129,000 in the operating budget, $850,000 for the sprinkler, and then the other 2.6 is everything else.
Okay.
So it sounds like the rationale is a myriad of safety, what they call safety, accessibility, and critical infrastructure needs that all could probably over time be in their operating budget, and they've chosen to just take them all, do them all at one time is not really a fair thing. These projects, I think they've said, would take 2 years to complete.
Correct. But they'd have the appropriation.
They'd have the appropriation to do
Well, none of
that.
the articles I just ticked off fall in those two categories.
Which 2 categories?
The 2 categories you just mentioned.
Safety, accessibility, and critical infrastructure.
Yeah. I think, replacing iPads is not critical infrastructure, not safety either. And a lot of these things I just said, refresh this, refresh that, upgrade wireless access points, the place is not going to fall down if there's, and replace backup servers, replace VMware, replace network storage area, replace this, that, and the other thing. A lot of IT stuff in here, and that this is neither one of those, doesn't fit either one of those 2 categories. It sounds like critical infrastructure, but I wouldn't call that critical infrastructure. I'm not saying they don't need it, I'm just saying,
I agree. I don't know. And that's where I'm struggling, because I don't know. And I think that our voters are going to want to know. I think when we go into town meeting, I hope, someone is going to say, well, what exactly is in that? And why are you doing those things? Or they'll explain
That's
it.
why I hope they come to the warrant article, if we could have, not the highlight, if we can just tease out the things that add up.
We've got
gonna
a
ask them to do
consolidated
that.
list. Well, we actually did receive a consolidated list just in the past day or so.
So anyway,
The one other thing I will say, going back to the slide deck and tax rate implications, because we had talked about that in our
Yeah.
joint meeting. Essentially, if both debt exclusions pass, it's 11 cents per thousand on the rate, estimated, obviously, at this point. The other piece that was touched on a couple different times, but not really in depth, for FY19 debt right now, the budget that we've put together, we just assume $25,000 of carrying cost, a ban for FY19 for all of these projects. So really, there won't be any impact on next year's tax rate. It will hit FY20 once they convert those bans. And at that point, that 11 cents per thousand will come on at the same time that 40 cents per thousand is dropping off for the middle school debt. So even if both debt exclusions pass, we'll actually see a net decrease in our tax rate of about 29 cents per thousand.
so the tax rate is not based on the appropriation? I mean, we're going to appropriate if this passes. We will have
Correct,
appropriated
but
this.
it's,
We're not,
right, it is. You have an appropriation, but it's just, that first year is just paying, it's just in
So
paying the interest.
right, so the expense won't be there, but it
Correct.
would impact the tax rate technically.
No, it won't impact the
Okay.
rate until 20.
Okay. Anyway,
Because then those costs won't come online. That's when the costs.
the cost will come online in
Correct.
20, yeah.
Right.
Let's wait, let's.
Okay.
So have we voted to put it on the warrant?
Yes. We did, I think? Yeah, I think we did. Because I think Jack said, well, let's do the easy thing, which was to vote to put it on the
I'm not
warrant.
sure that was Article 4 or Article 5.
Okay.
I think it was
All right.
Article 4. so
Sorry.
I recommend we put it on the warrant.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. So we got that, Catherine Dinsley. Now the question is, do we want to vote favorable action or not? Recognizing that a discussion we just had. What say ye?
So we'll structure the motion as favorable action?
No.
Just so that, well, so that
We
way.
haven't voted on that yet.
Yeah, I understand. But, so I think that, again, depending on how the vote goes, I think that's something we can sort out with the finance committee at our meeting tomorrow
I
night.
hope so. If we
But I-
can't sort that out, we should be all replaced. Anyway. It's just whether you go 4-0, 1 to 4, blue, you know. You want to take a break and think about this?
No, because it's not, so if I use the reason that I would not vote favorable action for the override because I don't have enough information, I could say the same thing about this. The difference is I actually know what those things are,
No, they're right in front of us.
and I don't know why they're important or why they should be done at this time, or how they relate to safety, accessibility, and infrastructure, but I do know what the items are, so, yeah, I would vote for favorable action. Do I need to make a motion? Or did you just do that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay. I move that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article, let me get the right one, 5. That's the motion. Now, you thinking about it? It's not so straightforward, is it? I don't think it is, anyway. And I could be persuaded
Persuaded what?
to change my mind. That's because it's so surreal that we have so little information about so much money. I can't make it.
Well, we have 3 choices here. We can vote favorable action, unfavorable action, or abstain. We don't usually abstain on these things, either vote for it or against it, as they say down south. I'm leaning towards abstaining.
You've delayed until you have more information.
Yes, you're gonna do it at the meeting.
Well, do it at the meeting. I like that idea, yes. You want to sit right up here? Yeah, we've done that before.
Yeah, and at the very least, I would like to be with the FinCom and hear some of their discussion.
Okay, let me
before-
restructure the vote. I recommend that we delay our vote on favorable, unfavorable action until town meeting. And report our favorable, unfavorable action at town meeting, which the warrant book will go forward on saying that the selectmen are not, whatever the right words are,
To be presented at town
can
meeting.
be presented at town meeting. How do you like that one?
If we're willing to get up at town meeting and say what we think, and that's fine with me.
Well, we
And I
can,
don't think we'll have all the information. I mean,
No,
by
but-
then, we'll know if we have the information or not.
we'll know, and then we'll also be persuaded or not persuaded by Dr. Harvey's presentation.
I agree. So,
So we will delay our recommendation on this action until further, and we'll report on our recommendation at town meeting.
so do we need to vote to
Yes.
put that in the warrant? Okay.
We already did that,
I mean, to
It's-
put to that wording.
yes.
Yeah, to
So-
be determined at town meting. Yeah.
All in
to be-
favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Okay.
I think those are the hard ones, for me, anyway.
Oh, yes, I hope so. Use of free cash to fund the fiscal 2019 capital improvement plan.
I'm sorry. I was about to say it's a no-brainer, but I was really trying to hold it back.
I guess I'm having more influence than I thought.
I couldn't do it. I just couldn't hold it back,
I think
Jack.
it's a no-brainer.
I'm sorry. I just could not hold that back. I tried.
Okay, I recommend we put Article 6 on the warrant.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. That was good. And I recommend we vote favorably on Article 6, consistent
Second.
with the town meetings, consistent with the favorable action by 5-0 to vote in the Finance Committee. I second that. All in favor? Aye. Ooh, that was a good one. You can get to do Article 7. I'm just alternating.
Okay, so I will move, Article 7 is the Water Department capital expenditure. I would vote to put Article 7 on the warrant.
I second that. All in favor? Aye.
And I would recommend that the Board of Selectmen, or make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article 7.
Second. All in favor? Aye. I agree. Article 8, that's cemetery and other trust funds. By the way, the last one was 5-0 by the FinCom. Cemetery and other trust funds. To accept, I'll read it. To accept the cemetery and other trust funds received in fiscal 2017 as printed in Part 1 of the town report and on file with the town clerk, or take other actions relative thereto. So I recommend we put this on the warrant.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. It's on the warrant. I recommend favorable action consistent with the FinCom recommendation.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You're on cemetery maintenance fund.
Yeah, before I read that one, is there any contemplation of putting some of these together in a consent
Yeah.
agenda?
So-
Because we do have a pretty,
Yeah, I would say potentially 8 through 10 are really the only standard articles that would be, and maybe 11.
Yeah, 11 too.
11, the Iron Rail Rental Revolving Fund
Yeah.
is still relatively new. We're increasing the allocation from 20,000 this year to 25,000 next year, and it's related to Article 12 in terms of funding the issuance of debt for their capital needs. So that
okay.
one's a little more difficult. Certainly
I guess it
8 through
just
10
looks-
is a standard.
yeah, and I just think we should keep that in mind because there's a lot. Anyway, relative to Article 9, so I think where we are, which is cemetery maintenance fund transfer, authorize the treasurer to withdraw a sum of money not to exceed $7,500 from the sale of cemetery lots and transfer and deposit said funds into the general fund. And this purpose of the transfer is to subsidize highway department expenditures for the care and operation of the 3 cemeteries in the town of Wenham. I think that's something that we have, an article that we've had in the past. So I will make a motion to put Article 9 on the warrant.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. And I'll make a second motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. FinCom voted 5-0 unanimously on that as well. Roadwork Chapter 90, we do this every year. Whatever the state gives us, we want to take. And that, basically, so I recommend we put Article 10, Roadwork Chapter 90 funding on the warrant.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I recommend favorable action on this article as well, consistent with the FinCom's 5-0 favorable action vote.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You got 11.
Does the board agree to do consent agenda for items 8 through 10?
I think we should, go, if we're going to meet tomorrow night or the next, when can we vote on that? I'd like to go back and look at how many items. I'd like to put more on the consent agenda rather than less, but
Sure.
I think that.
We can talk about that tomorrow night with the Finance
Yeah.
Okay,
Committee.
let's talk
Let's
about
do
that
that.
tomorrow night.
Okay.
Maybe we can look at it
I want to
and
go back
see.
tonight and look, tomorrow and check off which ones I think. Many of these, like Catherine just said a minute ago, are no-brainers, but some of these are in between, like this one we just mentioned right now. The roadwork, that's certainly annual authorization of revolving funds. You could go either way in that one, I suppose. Anyway, it's your article. Catherine.
Okay, so this is Article 11, Annual Authorization of Revolving Funds, and we have grouped 2 revolving funds together in this article to see if the town will vote pursuant to Mass General Law to reauthorize the following revolving funds and establish the spending limits. One is the Hamilton Wenham Grounds Maintenance fees and reimbursements from the town of Hamilton and Hamilton Wenham Regional School District for the purpose of paying employees, purchasing supplies, services, equipment, and miscellaneous expenses related to grounds maintenance to be expended by the Department of Public Works. And the second one is the Iron Rail Rental Again, I think you said this is the second year that
This
we've
is-
done this. So revenues collected through rental fees from tenants of the Iron Rail property for the purpose of paying for facility maintenance and capital investments to be expended by the Iron Rail Commission. Spending limits for the Hamilton Wenham ground maintenance not to exceed $20,000. I think that's the same, is it?
It is
as
the
last
same,
year?
yeah.
And Iron Rail rental not to exceed $25,000, which is a slight increase, or the same as last year?
The Iron Rail rental is an increase.
Increase of
So it's,
$5,000.
yeah, it was, for this first year, FY '20, it was 20,000. But essentially to pay for the $235,000 of capital needs that we're issuing debt for, we had to increase it by $5,000 to make those annual payments.
Okay.
And then that difference is actually almost entirely budget revenue neutral, because there's a 2.5% escalator for the 3 major lease agreements for those tenants. So it's really net about the same impact to the bottom line of the budget. And we've already accounted for that $25,000 off the top of the Iron Rail rental revenues for next year.
Just as an aside, I think this is I'm going to recommend that we vote favorable action, but I think this is it's been a long time coming to have this revolving fund and to be putting aside some of their revenues, earmarking them, essentially putting them in a revolving fund to allow them to accumulate over time and use them for capital improvements for the Iron Rail is a really good thing. So
The one thing I will say before you make the motion, I just realized there was a typo carryover from this current year. For the Hamilton Wenham grounds maintenance, I think we've referred to it, Hamilton's not going to be doing this going forward,
good
so
about
we're
that.
in the process of revising the IMA with the schools. The board will see it sometime in the next few weeks. But Hamilton is going to drop out of the mix, and we're just going to be providing those services for the school district for the 3 elementary schools going forward.
Yeah, Bill Tyak presented that when he made his budget recommendations to us a while ago.
Yep.
Mentioned that.
okay.
Want to put it on the warrant first?
Yes, I will make a motion to put Article 11 on the warrant.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
And then,
Favorable action.
are we recommending favorable action for each of these separately, or I guess that's together?
No, it's together. They actually, the Municipal Modernization Act, all revolving fund annual reauthorizations actually go in one article now. We only had one before, now we have 2. We had to set them apart last year because we had to create the
Right.
Iron Rail, but it'll be,
So if a voter agreed with one and didn't agree with the other, too bad. It's
probably.
up or down.
Probably an abstention, I think.
Okay, so I will make a motion to recommend favorable action by the Board of Selectmen.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'll have Article 12, debt issuance for Iron Rail capital needs. This is, see if the town would approve issuance of debt in the amount of $235,000 for costs associated with certain capital improvements to the Iron Rail facility, including the installation of a new roof and septic system and pavement work. All sounds pretty critical to me. I vote that we put it on the warrant.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
FinCom voted 5-0 for favorable action on this. I would also recommend favorable action.
I will second that, but I have a question. So I presume that if this, so the 11 and 12 are kind of related?
Yeah.
Because the money from 11 is going to pay for 12? Is that correct?
It is, but the issuance of debt will be a general obligation issuance, because obviously there could be a scenario where the Iron Rail facility went away, we didn't have that rental revenue coming in, so the town would be obligated to make those payments.
Right.
So that's an important distinction to know. And just the one other thing I'll mention is that we're obviously working with bond counsel on the specific language for the article. What's in there now is really just a placeholder.
So this is not a debt exclusion, it's just issuance of debt.
Correct.
So no ballot, just a town meeting vote,
Correct.
2/3.
Yep, 2/3 majority.
Okay, so, did I make that motion? Did I second that
We put it on the
motion?
warrant, and I made
a
the motion.
And I seconded, I had a question, but my question's been answered.
All in favor? Aye.
It's kind of hard to keep, remember what
Catherine,
we're-
that was, you got that. You got Article 13, Catherine.
Yep.
creation of water mitigation fund and transfer from water reserve account. One of my favorite topics. To see if the town will approve the creation of a new water mitigation account and the transfer of $20,900 from water reserves already collected for this purpose into this account.
Which might go on the consent agenda if we...
Yeah, except I think it's going to require a little explanation. But I will make a motion that we put this on the warrant.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
And I will make a motion to recommend favorable action.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
But I will make a comment.
So will I.
So, oh, go ahead.
I just want to make sure the audience knows that the FinCom voted 5-0 in favor of this.
Right. But I'd also like folks to understand that this is money that the Water Department has been collecting, appropriately, I guess, and has been sitting in their general fund. Right. So what we're doing here is actually making sure, ensuring, I guess, that water mitigation money that is collected goes into an account, is separated, and we'll know how much it is, and we'll be able to account for how it's spent and the fact that it will be spent on water mitigation.
And going forward, there'll be a process for collection that's outside of the water department. It's really when these larger projects go through the permitting process,
right?
Which is a similar program to what Danvers has in place under the guidance of DEP. So,
and this is a little off the subject, but since you said that, so the permitting sets the amount. The land use board set the amount, not the water department. Presently, this $20,900. Someone
it's been set by the water department.
But going forward, it would be
collected by through the permitting process.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. We're not planning to change the amount per the bedroom count.
Okay.
That is in place now.
So I think we voted on that, and
we
I was
did already. You just had a
was
question,
just
and I guess you got an answer.
Yep, I did.
You got Article 14.
Okay. This is creation of a water capital reserve account and transfer from the water operating budget to see if the town will approve the creation of a new water capital reserve account and the transfer of $35,000 from the FY19 water operating budget into this account. I recommend, I'd like to make a motion to put Article 14 on the warrant.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Can you just explain this just really briefly? I think yep. My biggest question is will the money be always from water fees? So
there's $36,000 in debt dropping off from the water budget for starting in FY19. And the water department budget over the past 4+ years has essentially been level funded. The rates have stayed the same. We've added that new tier, but that's not really to collect revenues. It's to change behavior, encourage conservation and adherence to the outdoor watering ban. And so the idea here is that there's 23 miles of water mains in Wenham that we're ultimately responsible for. 40, 50, 60 years old at this point in relatively good condition. But ballpark estimate is $1 million a mile for replacement of water main. Those are current costs, including details and engineering and everything else. So the thought was to set up this water capital reserve account, fund it out of the operating budget, keeping the operating budget static level, and then transferring that amount, that $35,000 amount, to begin chipping away at that liability that's somewhere down the road.
The water operating budget. When you say take $35,000 up from the operating budget, you're saying
the water operating budget,
okay.
yeah.
Okay,
yep.
I get it.
Yep.
Did I make a motion? Okay.
We put it on the agenda. We haven't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article 14.
Second, all in favor? Aye. It's consistent, by the way. The FinCom voted 5-0 in favor of this.
Okay, Jack.
The next one is Article 15.
Yeah,
it's going to be forever. Let's
I'll give that one to you.
take a sleep.
Please.
All right. All right, these are the CPA appropriations. So obviously, we have a CPA committee, CPC committee. The chairman is with us tonight. They've met with the various applications and voted what they voted. And so we're going to go through which they have recommended. But first, I want to do the easy part. By the way, by saying I recommend we put this on the warrant. Otherwise, we'll be shot.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. So I don't want to spend 25 minutes on this. I just want to go kind of run through this, and because it's 10 after 8. If you think there's something that's particularly important, I'm going to stop at the end of this, and you can make a comment about the process or any of the votes. But I just want to get these. I think do we vote these individually? Yes, we do. So, okay. By the way, I'm looking through this. The FinCom has voted favorable action 5-0. Every one of these I'm about to go through. So the first one is oh, God. To fund $39,000 to fund. Did I put this on the warrant? Yes, we did put it on the warrant. So $39,000 to fund the balance reserve for historic resources, to fund balance reserve for open space and recreation, and the $39,000 to fund reserve for community housing. This is an annual vote, right?
That's a required, right? 10% for those, 10% of the total for those categories.
The main thing you wanted, people are interested in are the allocations to special projects.
Right.
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 And that comes later on.
Right. Right. So I guess, however, we have to vote on these.
Yeah, so we put, I guess, did we
We put the
just
whole
put
thing
the whole,
on.
whole of
I
Article
put the Article 15 on.
Right,
So now the question is, do we agree with Section A, I guess?
Section 1A.
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 I move that we approve Section 1A. They favorable action on Section 1A.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next is to see if the sum of $265,500 from fiscal 2019 CPA revenue to fiscal 19 budgeted reserves. Want to explain that one, Catherine? Harriet?
This is just by statute.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
We have to make allocations to these various areas, and if we use that phrase budgetary reserve, it allows us to act on that between town meeting, if we have a special town meeting.
I vote favorable action on this.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We got 2 down. Next is the sum of $75,000 for fiscal 2019 estimated CPA revenue to the CPA administrative account. That's to run your business, right?
7,500, right?
What did I say?
7,000. Bet they'd like 75,000, but I think that's statutory.
Should be split amongst the 3 selectmen and the committee.
What does it say there?
It says a sum of $7,500 for fiscal 2019 estimated CPA revenue. Have you seen these?
Yes, but I just lost it on here.
Okay. To the CPA administrative accounts. It's taking the money out and put it in your administrative account.
It reverts back if we don't spend it all.
I hope so.
Back to the,
Yeah, okay.
okay.
I recommend favorable action.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Following sum to be appropriated from the indicated CPA source for the following purposes. The sum of $2,500 from the CPA fund balance to the Town of Wenham Cemetery Commission for the purpose of the Fairfield Cemetery Restoration Project. It's a small amount of money. I recommend favorable action.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Recommend the sum of $9,500 from the CPA fund balance to the Town of Wenham Cemetery Commission for the Main Street Cemetery gravestone preservation. I recommend favorable action.
Second, but I have a question. I think it's a question for Harriet. This $9,500, will it complete the gravestone preservation project?
Of the old stones.
Yeah.
Yes, these are for some additional stones that weren't covered by the past 2 projects.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
All right, now we're getting to some serious money here. Let's see.
Exactly.
The sum of $46,009.87 from the Historic Preservation Fund balance, and the sum of $87,250 from the CPA fund balance for a total of $133,250. They didn't put the 87 cents in here. For the purpose of paying the debt service in fiscal 2019 on the $2,151,421 supplemental borrowing under the Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 44B, for the rehabilitation of the 163-year-old. This is debt service from the town. Basically.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop right there. Okay. And that we've been doing this every year, and it's a little less.
Be in trouble if we didn't.
Goes to
2020?
27, 28?
2027. Wow. It'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we have to keep this fund, so we can pay for this money every year.
It's also a general obligation bond, correct?
What's that?
It's a general obligation bond. So if this, for some reason, were not to pass, we still obviously have to pay.
We're stuck, right?
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I vote favorable action.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
One more.
Okay. The sum of, vote the sum of $89,455. By the way, you could go back and change the pennies on this. So either you have no pennies at all, or you have the pennies in the, well.
I already got a note on the check.
They did vote the pennies.
Well, then you have to continue with that.
Yeah.
The accountant in me has noticed that.
I got the Jack Wilhelm note to self.
.87.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's why he's paying attention to the pennies.
Yeah, right. I'm a little doing my tax return now, too, so pennies count. So the sum of $89,455 from the CPA fund balance to the Wenham Museum for the preservation of the Claflin Garris Richards House.
Right.
That's the largest item in it. It's discretionary. And that, and the FinCom has voted 5-0 in favor of that, and that I vote, why don't you make the vote?
Okay, I will recommend the Board of Selectmen take favorable action on this warrant.
A second that. All in favor? Aye.
Enthusiastically. I think it's really important to continue the maintenance of that historic building in our town center.
Yeah, the reason I asked Catherine, in full disclosure, I'm on the board of the Wenham Museum.
So you can, yeah.
I've just been promoted to assistant junior clerk.
And you get paid a lot, right? You have a lot of financial advantage.
The payment goes the other way. Oh, boy, here's another one. Marijuana bylaws, this is you.
Well, I have to tell you.
I wonder what you're going to say.
Well, I can tell you right now that I am not prepared to vote for 16 through 19, 20, 21,
22,
22,
23, 24,
24, and 25, and 26.
And 26.
Because they all.
And 27.
And,
we'll keep, and it didn't necessarily translate. I tried to highlight the articles that would be pertinent for the board to vote on tonight.
Right.
And it didn't necessarily come through in the copy.
All of those, from my point of view, even to, well, I guess we could vote to, well.
I second that motion.
I'm just trying to think if there are any, we could go through and decide whether we wanted them on the warrant, but until we see language, we haven't for any of those.
Oh, wait a minute.
I don't think.
We're done with CPA funds.
Yeah, so from 16, at least until.
Well, let's go to 26. And let me, if I can just give you some updates?
Yes,
general,
please.
On all these. So the marijuana bylaw placeholder, the board agreed when we last talked about it to move forward with 4 articles. The first is the zoning bylaw ban. The second is a general bylaw ban. The third is some kind of restrictive zoning in case the bans fail. And then the fourth is the adoption of the 3% local option tax. The Finance Committee did weigh in on that Article 19, the adoption, the local option tax, favorably recommending that. But we are obviously working with town council. We got there's been some back and forth about the exact language for these articles as recently as today. I'd expect to be able to circulate the exact wording of those bylaws that town council has recommended by the end of the week to both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. The Planning Board, as they have to for any zoning bylaw amendments or new zoning bylaws, have to hold a public hearing. They were originally planning on holding that public hearing on March 1st. There was a mistake made by the Chronicle in posting the legal ad that required us to post scramble last week. and get it in with the Salem News. So the new hearing date for the planning board to hear all of these zoning bylaw changes is March 5th. So really right before we're closing the warrant. But the Article 20 is a general bylaw that has land use implications, so it won't be included in the public hearing, but we, want the zoning board and planning board to weigh in generally on them. But all of the other zoning bylaws are being reviewed right now by town council, and we would expect guidance from them, any changes in the next several days to a week at the most for that. So that information will be out there, and we will circulate around again by the beginning of next week.
So I have a suggestion.
Okay.
I think we should vote to put all of these on the warrant, but not take any action. Because we can't take any action because we don't have the specifics.
Well,
Subject to us deciding later on we're going to take it off the warrant. Just a suggestion.
Well, I'm thinking about the logistics and this very tight schedule. So we put them on the warrant, and then for some reason or other, we find out the day before we send the warrant to print that we're going to not do that.
Right.
So I guess even at that point, even if they were printed, we could pass over them at town meeting?
We could. We could pass over them, but I would recommend we don't get that far. We decide, at a very last, when the gun goes off, if we're not satisfied that we have the material to present to the town, we take it off the warrant.
Okay.
On one of these.
That's probably the safest approach. At least we have them on the warrant.
And that, because I don't want, some of these are going to be acceptance of Settlers Lane, zoning.
So actually, the one thing that I will add, that can hold true for 16 through 25, but as of today, the acceptance of Settler Lane as a public way is off of the warrant for this town meeting. Okay. There's a general bylaw provision that says that we have to receive the request to go through that process a minimum of 60 days before town meeting, and we just got their notice last week, February 13th.
There you go.
And if you look at the statutory process that the town has to go through, even to get it on the warrant for a town meeting, there's about a half dozen steps along the way involving both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, and it's iterative and everything. So there's no way that we could actually get this on the warrant. So that's been taken off.
And do we know on 27 definitively whether it's off or on? I mean, whether from their point of view.
At this point, it's still planned to be on. We have the survey results, the borings have been done, and we anticipate getting a report with recommendations and cost estimates by the end of next week. So it's going to be tight, but we knew it was going to be tight all the way through.
Yeah, so I guess, Jack, what you're saying is that we're making a motion to put Articles 16 through 25 on the warrant without further discussion at this point.
When we just go 16 to
25 is the
bylaw amendment common driveways. Subject to, without taking a vote whether we're in favor or not.
Right.
And with the understanding that we're going to have to get a lot more comfortable with these.
Yeah, have language.
And to, A, just decide whether we want it on the warrant.
Right.
And then, two, what our recommendation is going to be at a future selectmen's meeting, which has to be pretty soon. Peter and I talked about having another meeting next Tuesday night, and that we're meeting tomorrow night, but there's obviously nothing's going to happen between now and tomorrow night for this. But what do you think? What do you think we would be a week from tonight?
So the only issue with all of the zoning bylaw changes is you may have the language by tomorrow night, but you won't have had the public hearing, and you won't have the input of the planning board.
Okay, let me rephrase it. next Tuesday night, can we knock off, will we have enough information to knock off whether we want to, we've already put it on the warrant, whether we want to have it continue on the warrant and what our recommendation would be at the town meeting?
I wouldn't expect anything substantive to change. Town council's going to give their, maybe some tweaking of the language, but essentially, issue-wise, nothing is going to change substantively.
So no.
Between now and then, no.
So to that also for the logistics, so the planning board will hold a hearing on the 5th. They will, are they required to vote?
They are.
And if they vote no, does that mean they do not recommend favorable action, or does that say, okay, it's done, it doesn't go on the warrant? I don't know how much authority their vote.
I believe that it's just favorable action, but I'd have to double check because we haven't run into that.
So they could have their public hearing and potentially decide that some of these can't be.
I mean, my understanding is the Board of Selectmen has full discretion over what goes on the warrant and what doesn't. And the planning board is just giving their recommendation.
Right.
But I have to
I'm
confirm.
going to change my recommendation again. So my recommendation is we put all of these for now on the warrant, okay? And then we have three choices down the road. One, we can also vote prior to going to public, take it off the warrant if we're not comfortable with it for whatever reason. Or leave it on there and then decide that we still don't know enough and we need more dialogue. We can recommend, the selectmen would give the recommendations at town meeting. And because some of the stuff here, I mean, this wireless stuff and that.
Well, that's an easy one, actually. That's a Scrivener's error that we just hope doesn't become any
Not
more.
that, but, I like to know exactly what the missing reference is, and that, because if I had to get up in the podium right now, what the hell I'm talking about, so that, and I trust that it's in here for a good reason. So I'm just saying we can reverse our decision on one or more of these to put it on the warrant at a subsequent meeting. But that would have to go prior to us going to press.
Which is March
6th.
It's really, we're talking about the March 6th meeting that we'd be making a determination.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can take it off the warrant on March 6th if we don't want it. And we can then decide at the March 6th meeting, how many of these do we think we know enough about to vote favorable or unfavorable action, which presumably be favorable, and how many of these we want to still leave on the warrant, but we want to talk about some more whatever, and we would recommend, give our recommendations at town meeting, much like we did a few minutes ago on one of the school articles.
Okay. So that's Article 16 through 25.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we need a motion for that? What article? To put on the warrant?
We already did that, didn't we?
Yeah, you haven't voted, but you did.
We haven't voted, so, but we
I
have a motion.
recommend we put them on the warrant.
Okay. Second.
All in favor, aye.
And 26 is off.
Off.
Right.
Longfellow Road.
Yeah.
27 we had started to talk about.
Yeah. So we think we're going to have enough information to put this on the warrant and discuss it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we don't take any action on this tonight?
Well, it sounds like we take an action to put it on the warrant.
Yes.
Yes, but that's all. So I would.
Actually, we haven't actually made that motion. We have to.
No, yeah, I was going to.
Okay,
Is that
please.
okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So I move that we put Article 27, the Longfellow Road and South Street Home Rule petition on the warrant.
Second, all in favor, aye. 28.
So I have questions. They're probably not substantive questions, they're not going to change anything, but I have questions on all of on the next several. So I don't know what your pleasure is, Jack.
well,
We could
my
certainly
point-
put,
Here's what I suggest, same suggestion I made a minute ago. Let's put 28, 29, 30, and 31 on the warrant. 32, 33, all the rest of these on the warrant, and then do what I just said a minute ago. Decide later on by March 6th to take them off. And some of these we might know enough about to be comfortable making your recommendation, probably favorably. And some of these we'll have to give recommendations to town meeting as to whether we recommend favorable action or not.
so the rest, 28, 29, 30.
So I move that we put articles, where did we end up, 26?
I think we did 27.
No, 25. So I recommend articles 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 32 to 36, and 37. Actually, we can probably vote 37.
Yeah, I don't even think we've taken
There's no.
no favorable action. We hope the election
I recommend we put
happen.
all of these on the warrant.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And to recommend to further review whether we want, prior to the publication of the warrant, we won't have to make a motion of that, but prior to the publication of the warrant, whether we still want these on the warrant, and that which ones of these we want to actually give a recommendation that's printed, and which ones we want to give our recommendations at town meeting.
So there are, of those lists, there are 3 that the Finance Committee has reviewed and taken favorable action on. I think it might be helpful to at least have discussion about those, to understand what your questions are, or take a vote on what the board's recommendation is on those 3. So I'm talking about 28, 30, and 31.
Yeah, I'm in favor of them.
So my basic question on on several of these, on 28, I have actually, the only question I have, which is the Municipal Veterans Assistance Fund.
Yep.
And it's actually not a financial question, really, because it's proceeds that are coming from donations that would be on a tax bill, separate from taxes. In several of these, we may or may not have a body that administers this money.
We do in this case.
Well, it's a little, if you look at the statute, we do in some ways, but you also have to be consistent with the statute.
Which is actually, I guess, my question, because
right.
the statute talked about the veterans agent.
So, but it also talks about, looking at the wrong one right now, hold on a second.
Tab those. Because there were, sort of.
There we go. So it says that this Municipal Veterans Assistance Fund will be under the supervision of the local veterans agent, the board or officer in charge of the collection of the municipal charge, fine, fee, or the town collector of taxes. So.
One of those 3?
And then if you look further down, it says that the Veterans Services Department shall be responsible for reviewing each applicant and fairly applying the eligibility and level of need standards. And just above that, it talks about the city, town, or district's Veteran Services Department. So we're part of a district. My sense is, in reading through the statute, is that at the end of the day, the VSO, as long as we remain in the district, the VSO for the Eastern Essex Veterans District would ultimately award these funds, but that the Veterans Committee could be involved, certainly in outreach, and in approving those funding awards similar to what WISH does.
But there's no statutory requirement for that. It sounds like the VSO could make the decision about who.
Well, no, actually,
money.
It says that that we set up the application process.
Right, and make the standards.
And set the eligibility standards and all of that. And so my interpretation, I could certainly check with council if you want, is that the Veterans Committee could have a seat at the table as part of that process.
Okay, but it doesn't, we don't have anything memorializing that. So, and it's kind of separate from the vote. So we have the statute. The statute's a little vague.
Right.
It seems like there ought to be something behind the statute or behind the.
We have to. The statute requires that we have we basically adopt a policy and a process
Right.
to Yeah.
So I would not like to see this, spend time at town meeting, have this approved, and then just sort of let it flounder. As it seems like we have, for whatever reason, on the educational and the scholarship one, unless I'm unaware of that money being spent. So I don't know if there's something in town meeting or on the warrant that we can do to ensure that there is some
So we
policy?
we talked about this. Yeah, it would be a policy. We talked about this at the Veterans Committee meeting last week. I've talked with a couple members of the committee since. They've expressed interest in ensuring that it doesn't just get administered at the district level. If the Veterans Committee is involved in some way, and I think between now and town meeting, we could certainly provide more information, develop a policy that would be consistent with that, so that would be clear, and then we could, include that in the commentary.
So contingent on having all of those, I certainly would recommend favorable action on that.
Yeah, this was presented to the Veterans Committee. They were enthusiastic about it. And
Conceptually, it's great. It's
yeah, there is one of the veterans things that there was one person in town who's a recipient of the Veterans Work-Off Program, because he was here in the audience. I forget his name. And that, do you know who it is?
He's actually not, if I think it's who you're thinking of, the person that's in the Veterans Program is on the committee, the Veterans Committee. The person who's in the audience is technically senior tax work-off.
That's what I meant. He was in the room, but he right. The gentleman sat right there in the front.
Bill Wilson.
He sat back there, then came to the front. That's right. He
does the tax work-off program.
Yeah, that's on
the senior tax work-off program.
Not the veterans.
Oh, not the veterans.
No, Bruce.
Bruce Blanchard. Veterans. He's the first one.
Is the first one this year.
I got it.
He swapped programs.
I got it.
So, and to be clear, this is a separate fund.
Completely
Yes.
separate,
Right, okay.
and it's not. It's tied to income eligibility. It's specific. It's narrowly construed to be paid for certain purposes: utility bills, heating, that kind of thing.
Okay, so again, I
Vegas trips every third year.
recommend, I guess we've put it on the warrant. I recommend favorable action.
I do too.
Okay.
Aye.
So I have a few more complicated questions on 29.
29 we're skipping over.
Oh, good.
That is more complicated.
Wow, glad to hear it isn't just me. And some of the questions I think are very technical, and I'm going to meet with whoever offline and ask.
Well, I think honestly, Leslie and I have to do a little more work in terms of estimating potential cost impacts.
Yeah, that was one of the big questions I had. and I'll lay it out here. Some of it, too, is there are some examples in the information in the statute that are very useful examples, but would be even, I guess it's an informational guideline release, would be more instrumental or informational if they were Wenham specific, and I think they could be. So to get some idea of how much it would cost, who's eligible, is there no one eligible, so.
It definitely is, would cast a wider net in terms of eligibility than what we have in place currently.
Right, so the question is how much would it cost, yeah.
Yep, because it comes out of the overlay.
Right.
There's some capacity, but still relatively limited.
Okay. Article 30, what do you want to do with that?
Article 30 is one that the Finance Committee did act on, recommending favorable action at their meeting last Thursday.
It's modification of elderly tax
yeah.
deferral program interest rate. This has no real financial impact.
Yes, it does, but it's
on the town.
Yes, it does, and that. But it's this was written when mortgage rates were 7 or 8%, and so mortgage rates are now 3.5 to 4%, and so that it has a minor negative financial impact on the town. Correct?
Yeah.
But it's
Pretty minor.
no. But
I'd say it's minor potential impact too, because
Potential
very few residents have taken advantage of the
But
program.
we shouldn't be charging 8%. We should be 4%. So that.
And we have the program.
And we have the
presently
discretion
charging-
to decrease
Right.
the interest
Yeah,
rate,
so
and
that's an easy one. I would recommend favorable action.
I would second that.
All in favor, aye. On 31, I'm not, like you, I'm not prepared. I think this was, requires a little more discussion than this. That looks good.
Yeah.
Find him, find them,
And I'll
House numbering, $5. I don't know, how do you violate that one?
Not have one.
It's actually a
Pardon?
big deal for the people that deal with that one.
Yeah, and I think $5 is kind of low, actually.
Yeah.
Important to some
$5.
people.
I hear about that one.
I won't put my number on my house.
What
They
does
can
it mean?
figure out.
You gotta,
It means that if your house isn't properly numbered for when emergencies personnel are looking for your house when they're driving.
what does
to-
properly numbered mean? What is
Is the
improper?
From the street, clear, big enough.
It's in our town bylaws. There's a requirement.
That you even have the street number on your physical building.
There must
On
be
the
a
physical
size and everything
building?
else, that,
Yeah, in the bylaw.
When's the last time we fined somebody $5 for this?
I know that.
Was it before you were born?
That's a very low bar. That's a very low bar. She's very young.
Before I was born.
I was born.
I file things that were from before.
You know what, I'm nervous about this one. So, we say it has to be properly numbered. What does properly mean? 5 inches, 8 inches?
So yeah, let me, yeah.
Oh, God.
It's already called out in the bylaws. This is, honestly, Jack, what this is trying to get at is, no, most of these issues aren't really something that we're concerned about collecting the fees from. But on water use restrictions right now, if we were to when we issue tickets, and the residents were to choose not to pay them, we would have to go through the courts to collect those fees. Under this,
We could spend 45 minutes to an hour on this one thing at town meeting with people saying, swimming pools, what do you mean by the swimming pools? I don't want an answer right now, but, snow and ice removal, what does that mean? You're not shoveling the sidewalk, you didn't put the snow melt out, ice melt, whatever it is. I'm concerned about this article.
Well, I have to admit that I had to go back and look at the bylaws to know what some of these really were. But
so we can, the town has discretion in terms of what bylaws you can specifically list out. Generally, they have to be under the umbrella of housing, sanitary, or snow and ice removal. But my understanding from town council is that this is the most extensive list, and the board can choose to strike any of these from the list if you want. Like, if we're only really looking to use this as a tool to collect fines from water use restriction violations, then we could hypothetically, and maybe the zoning bylaw violations, catch-all, maybe those are the only two and stormwater management. Maybe it's just those three.
I have to think about that.
I don't even, the first one I definitely agree on. I don't know what stormwater management is, and that.
So we have a whole stormwater management bylaw that's required.
I think we should strike them all except for the water use restrictions right now. I mean, we could spend a whole Board of Selectmen meeting on, having somebody advise us as to swim pools, snow and ice removal, stormwater management. I don't want to go back to house numbering again, but.
Well, I think this would be up to the moderator to focus the discussion, if possible.
Well, somebody has to explain all this stuff.
Well, but the explanation is these are bylaws that already exist in town.
Well, fine, but if I was in the audience, I would say, well, explain to me the house numbering one. Peter just suggested we kill it, but for now, the stormwater management, what does that exactly mean? So, I mean, I wouldn't want to vote for this if I was in the town meeting, unless I really understood what that means, because it's a $200 fine associated with that. How am I going to be in violation of stormwater management? What is stormwater management?
Actually, my question was, who the heck would we appoint as a municipal hearing officer?
Well, that too. I don't think these things are bad. We just have to put a lot more time into them.
I think.
And time is running out.
Well, yes, I would agree. But I do think the ability to handle some of these issues in town, rather than have them go and be handled through the court system,
I agree,
is probably beneficial.
Absolutely.
And so that's the point of this. And
so for right now, would it be helpful if for our next meeting, whenever that is, the board had the sections of the bylaw that pertain, so you just understand what each of those issues,
and whether we
what's
want
in the bylaws now, and whether there's any driving interest, because to Jack's point, it might not be worth the amount of churn it gets at town meeting.
House numbering?
Correct. if there really isn't an issue in each of these different areas.
Right.
And I will check in the meantime with town council to confirm that that list can be shrunk down at our discretion.
And that, if we shrink the list, what we're shrinking is only those things that are on the list will be able to be administered
To the fine process.
locally through this process.
Correct.
The other things would still.
I'm in favor of just doing the water use restrictions for now. I'm not saying these aren't meritorious for doing some point, but not now. And I
Well-
need to know a lot more about it. Who the hell is going to explain this stuff at the town meeting?
Well, I think that
Zoning permits, yes.
I would like to see them before I make it, personally. I like to see what they are before I decide whether, this could be a bigger issue. Snow and ice removal could be a way more important issue than I think it is. But I'd like to see the bylaws again. I looked at a couple of them, like the house numbering one. So.
Well, I want to designate you, Catherine.
That'd be fine. I am happy to look at these and come up with what I think are priorities and not, and it's probably a shorter list.
Well, I was going to also say that we're going to designate you to explain this at town meeting,
Happy to do that, too.
whichever ones you select.
I'm happy to do that, too. If I feel strongly enough that they should be on the list, I ought to be willing to speak to them, right?
Catherine,
I'm,
just go ahead and dig a hole as far as you
okay.
want.
No, there are a lot of things that are on
But what
this
time
that
is that?
could-
We're not talking about last October, November. We're talking about, we got a month to go here, so that, we got 31 articles, and that,
Fully
we already
aware.
have like 10 of these. We don't know what we're talking about, so we have to get some.
Fully aware.
And that,
And if you wanted a suggestion for a couple that I would be willing to completely strike from the warrant, I could give you that, too. But I think maybe we're not ready to
Get into the.
to strike anything. But yes, if ultimately there are some here that I think are worthwhile and the board agrees,
even
I'm
the zoning bylaws. I mean,
happy
that,
to speak to them.
all violations relating to residential properties. I have to understand what are the violations in that. We've talked about this enough. But I mean, well.
We just need to understand what those are and if they're meritorious.
So the next Board of Selectmen agenda, put it on there, put CH, Catherine Harrison, next to we'll have a report for her.
Please send me
We'll begin the
actually,
meeting
I
at
have to
3:30 in the
bylaws, I
afternoon
can't
to make sure we're out of here by 9.
Well, we just started, this is only our second meeting with this list. So I think we're doing pretty well, actually. It's a very long list.
Many of these are routine and they're
Right.
repetitive media. This,
Which is helpful.
Which is helpful, exactly.
So we have this sort of kind of very vague list of 32 to 36 that are awaiting town council drafts. Are we suggesting?
Who knows what the hell they are? Okay.
So that's actually on the next sheet.
Yeah, I know what they are.
Yep.
But they have the
Oh, yeah,
least,
yeah.
we have the least information
Correct.
about those.
So again, going back and forth with town council on all 5 of those in the past couple days. But I would expect to have something concrete with some guidance by, obviously on the 6th, but if we're planning to meet next week, those are items that we could talk about at next week's meeting, separate from the zoning
Very
bylaws.
good.
So just to back up 1 second, because there's a question I think I'd like to have answered, not tonight, but before we have to do anything, on the signs. So we have it in here somewhere, a sign article that has to do with a sign policy, an amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment. Part of it is very specific to policy that the Board of Selectmen makes relative to signs on public property.
In what, a designated location?
Right,
Correct.
and again, I think, this is, talk about spending an hour at town meeting. I think if we're going to put this on the warrant, before town meeting, we'd better have our policy together. How many signs, how long, how do they apply for them, where are they going to be, how
lot of
many
people
are there
interested,
going to
yeah.
be on that spot? So,
We'll absolutely have that information as part of that. And there, as I've talked about, when I think we went through this list the first time through, it's not just going to be that narrow, this zoning bylaw change. It's an evolving world out there in terms of court cases and legal precedent, in terms of sign bylaws, and so we're going to have a full refresh of that whole section 7 sign bylaw.
right. I was just thinking that there was one piece of it that was really specific to the Board of Selectmen. I think I'm going to do a site walk. Is it that strip in front of Pingree Park? Okay.
Yeah, signs are very active. People
Yeah,
pay
we'll-
attention to that.
Yeah, we'll be
Or not, I mean, you know.
better about that.
All right, that was easy.
Yeah.
We have 2 items left. Finance Director Performance Evaluation, Potential Extension of Employment Contract. Hello.
Which we've now postponed at least once, right?
One time, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was originally slated for the February 6th meeting, but that was an action-packed agenda.
Yeah.
So do you want me to
Please.
summarize? So Leslie, when she became the finance director / treasurer collector, when she was appointed to that position last February, there was an employment agreement at the time that was put in place that basically set out the past year as a probationary period, and that the contract would be extended through June of 2019 if at the conclusion of that probationary period she was doing a good job in the position, and the language specifically in the agreement is that the town administrator, in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen, that would make that determination.
So let me read the motion. John would have this if he was here. I move the initial probation period for Leslie Davidson, Finance Director / Treasurer / Collector.
There's some more slashes in there if you want to.
I only have, no one can accuse me of drinking it. I've been here since 5:30. Has ceased, I've been on TV for the last 3 hours. Has ceased, and the agreement
Will continue.
There's a typo. That doesn't make it any easier, does it?
Now we're messing with you, Jack.
Will continue to remain in effect until June 30th, 2019, consistent with what Peter just said a minute ago.
So I suppose I should second that, and then the discussion will be your assessment?
Yeah, so went through performance evaluation process. It's the first time in a long time that our employees have gone through that process, so there was a fair amount of time spent. Yeah, Leslie's first.
First.
Yeah.
First.
Lucky lady. So did a full refresh on our evaluation form, and obviously from this year going forward, annual goals are going to be included in that process. But for this past year, it's really just looking at performance, and there were 11 different categories that Leslie was evaluated on, and that all non-union personnel will continue to be going forward, independent of the goals piece. And basically coming out of that process, it was either exceeds expectation, meets expectations, or needs improvement. And Leslie, by a strong majority, had exceeded expectations in most categories. There were a few meeting expectations, and nothing that she needs improvement on, obviously. I think she's done an excellent job stepping into the role. She's been here a number of years, but she's really dug in. She's great to work with, has meant a lot to the culture of Town Hall, and is really good at her job, but also really good to work with, and really takes a team approach. And based on my evaluation of her performance, couldn't endorse her enough to continue in the role. And she's obviously, this is the first time through the budget process, and she's jumped right in with both feet, and been a great addition and a great help.
I think she's doing an outstanding job. I have to say that she's right in front of me. No, you are doing an outstanding job.
You'd say it even if she weren't there, wouldn't
That's
you?
right. We already made the motion. All in favor?
Well, okay. Can I say that I agree that she's doing an outstanding job, and that I'm glad that the timing of this evaluation I think is very good, because not only personally have I been able to sort of observe from the outside Leslie doing her regular finance director work, but now I've seen Leslie with the budget in a number of meetings and have been extremely impressed. She's had a few, baptisms by fire, which she's handled really well, which doesn't surprise me. So anyway, that's all. I fully agree with everything that you said and completely endorse. Be very sad if there were any other conclusion than to renew her or continue her contract through 2000.
Next June. June of that.
And thank you.
Right here in the motion.
Yes, June 30th. So, okay, so I seconded it, and now I had my say, so I'm ready to vote whenever you are.
I'm not ready yet.
I can
All in
wait.
favor?
Aye. Enthusiastically, aye.
Enthusiastically, right.
I have this last one? Oh, good. You want to see
Now you can
it?
go home to get supper, okay?
Okay.
We have one more.
So at the last meeting, we said, go home and have a, never mind. At the last meeting, we agreed that the only thing we were going to talk about on this particular topic of proposed inspectional services was the intermunicipal agreement, because we had a lengthy discussion at our last meeting. So to honor that, I guess I'll make the motion first, and then you might be surprised that I have a couple of questions. I move the Board of Selectmen approve the proposed inspectional services intermunicipal, I can't say that word tonight, intermunicipal agreement with the Town of Hamilton for an initial term of July 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2020.
Second. One of your questions last week is Town Council reviewed this. Town Council
That
has
was one of my
reviewed this.
questions.
Town council has reviewed this and made some minor changes and generally in favor of the lead party without any direction on my part.
Yeah, our town council will leave. So I have one other question, which I think Jack would ask, but he probably already knows the answer. Has the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee in Hamilton seen this intermunicipal agreement, and do they agree?
Yes, they have. Both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, I believe, was discussed at their joint budget meeting last week, support the agreement and support moving forward. The one piece that I will say is that their town council, to my knowledge, hasn't reviewed the most recent changes that we just got this morning. So we sent them over and gave them the timeline, but I didn't hear back before the meeting tonight, so I can't say definitively that their town council has blessed the most recent iteration of it, but it could potentially be contingent upon if there's any issues.
Okay.
Not the intermunicipal agreement. I just think this whole thing is super. I think that Peter and Michael Lombardo working together and then pull this off. I don't think it would have been possible a few years ago, and that I applaud our Hamilton counterparts, namely the board, Michael Lombardo, and that everyone in Hamilton because they're giving up basically day-to-day management of this and allowing the town of Wenham to basically manage this. I think it's it's going to cost them more money than it's going to cost us, and that I think the whole business, particularly the building inspector, having a full-time building inspector for two towns, I think is very, very important. Of all the issues that I get calls for, it's complaints about some neighbor basically having a commercial business. We got two trucks in his driveway, or one truck in the driveway. It beeps in the morning, so forth, and that. And as you well know, although the police are now doing this on the used car dealership thing, we had complaints from Ivor Street residents about that, and that. So I think this is going to modernize our two towns' ability to respond. And we had some problems with the plumbing inspector, who's in charge. Someone's on vacation, they didn't tell somebody else, and so on and so forth. I think this is going to be more professionalizing our inspectional services, and so it's got to do with the intermunicipal agreement. But I think it's a feather in your cap getting this done. Have we voted on this already?
No, we have a motion and a second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Peter.
Good job.
Thanks.
Very good job. Now, my
was a
favorite
goal.
motion is I move we adjourn.
Are we not doing minutes? I'm sorry.
Well, John's the secretary, he's not here.
Okay. You don't want to do that? Okay.
By the way, I'd like to ask Catherine, is it possible, I'd really like to see the minutes of this meeting prior to our next meeting? Yes. Even if it's just in draft form, I don't want to go through, John, I want to read what we think we did tonight, and that, as a refreshment before we start, particularly in the bylaws. I'm really just, mostly the bylaws. If we can just get the section of the bylaws done and circulate it, so we can have that in front of us before we meet the next time. So did we really vote that, or did we really say this, or did we, because we've gone back and forth on some of these articles, starting around, I don't know, Article 20-something or other, 25 or 26. So just that section, if you can get an advanced draft out to us, that would be, I think, in my mind, would be very helpful to me.
Absolutely.
You agree?
I agree. So we just have 2 sets of minutes. We could do this in 2 seconds, and then these minutes could actually be done. Can we do that? I'm happy to make the motion.
Good.
I move to approve the Joint Board of Selectmen Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee meeting minutes of May 11, 2017. And, I guess I'm doing both of them, I move to approve the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes of February 6, 2018.
I have several concerns about this.
Okay.
I'm only kidding.
I'm going to sit back.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor, aye.
I make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. That's my motion.
Second.
I already made it.
I know, we just.